In this movie, we're going to take a quick review of the timeline behavior of both graphic and movie clip symbols. We saw in detail graphic symbols last time, and we saw just a little bit about movie clip symbols. So we're going to actually talk about that a little bit more tonight. And I have some pictures to help us here. Last time I was talking about fixed wheel bicycles. Those are the kind that messengers and bike racers use. And I thought about this, and I just remembered this picture that I have of me with my grandpa. And they bought me, my grandpa and granddad, or my granddad and grandmother bought me this tricycle. I think I was probably 3 or 4 in that. And I actually still remember that tricycle. Because what I still remember about it is that I had a great fun riding around on it on their flat sidewalks all over. And if you look at it, like a tricycle, the way it works is your pedals are right there on your front wheel. So if your feet move, your front wheel moves. Likewise, if your front wheel moves, your feet move. So all's well and good. We took it home, and my house that I grew up in was actually up on a hill. And so both our front sidewalk and our driveway both went downhill. So as soon as I got onto that, of course, the tricycle starts to roll. My front, the wheel has to roll. So in order for the wheel to roll, my feet had to roll. So, it's like my feet were going around real fast. And, your only brake is your legs. And otherwise you pull your feet off and get hit in the shins by the pedals or something. So what does that have to do with the graphic symbol? Well, we saw animation on the graphic symbol timeline. I want you to think about that graphic symbol timeline as the wheel on that tricycle. Okay? And I want you to think about your main timeline. That's the parent timeline of the graphic symbol. We're thinking about the main timeline now. It could also be another symbol's timeline. But anyway, think about the parent timeline as being my feet in those little shoes. Okay? If that wheel is going to move, the feet on the pedals have to move as well. So think if the playhead on the main timeline is my feet, if that playhead is not moving, graphic symbol timeline's not going to move. Okay? Now, move on to movie clip, and we get to look at, that's the bike I have now, and it's sweet. It's a Trek Belleville. I just love it. It's a very retro. It's a little bit heavy because it's an all steel frame, but you can bounce around on curbs and stuff with it. It came with white tires, though they're not that pretty anymore. And it's cool. It's got a built-in generator in the hubs, so you've got front light and back light automatically. Anyway, this is like a movie clip. If you think about the back wheel as being the timeline of the movie clip, okay? So there's the back wheel. That back wheel can roll around regardless of what my cranks are doing. I can pedal it. Sure, everything's fine. So my main timeline can be moving. The playhead can be moving on the main timeline, and the back wheel will be rolling. Or I can just coast, keep my feet still, and that back wheel can still run. So a movie clip timeline is not connected. It doesn't have that one-to-one relationship or dependence on its parent timeline. That becomes important in Flash because once we get into this a little bit deeper, as in tonight, we're going to see that we can actually control timelines with ActionScript. Now, your main timeline from the movies you've made already, you've seen that they loop around. You get to the end of your main timeline, it loops around to the beginning. Your main timeline acts a lot like a movie clip. It actually is the same programming class as a movie clip. So everything that you're doing on your main timeline is really just like doing something inside of a movie clip. Now, the only way you can control the timeline of a movie clip, the behavior of the playhead, is with ActionScript. And we're going to learn just the teeniest little bit of ActionScript tonight. We're going to learn how to stop the playhead on a movie clip timeline. So let's go to Flash. We're going to create a new movie, and we're going to create a bicycle wheel. I'm going to do this in a way that, let's just make our stage, we're going to use our color for our stage. our dark color again for our stage. We're going to make a bicycle wheel, and this will be a little bit of a review for as far as how to use some of the tools, but also it will be an opportunity for us to make two different kinds, or one single symbol, and make it act two different ways. Okay, so we're going to start out with no stroke. Actually, we're going to start out with a stroke that's going to be, oh, you know what? We're going to make this kind of whitish like my bicycle wheels on my Trek Belleville. It looks okay with black tires too. It actually looks maybe even better with black tires. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put a stroke on this that is, let's say, 8 pixels. And we'll just make ourselves, oops, wrong tool. Get the oval tool, that's O shortcut, and make our circle here. Let's go ahead and select this thing. Okay, right now it's just a stroked circle. How about that? Width and height of 100. That was exactly what I was going for. Man, I'm good. Okay. I'm going to make a symbol out of this, an art symbol for my library. And as you start making symbols, you're going to find that you can fall into a pattern or something. Well, you find that maybe you might not fall into a pattern at first. You might name them Steve or John or Nancy or something like that. But it's maybe better if you fall into a pattern that you're going to remember. For instance, this is going to be what I call an art symbol. It's a symbol that doesn't have any animation on its timeline. It's just going to be a picture or a piece of artwork that I can use in other symbols. So I'm going to name this in a way that's going to help me to remember what it is. First of all, by convention, I typically make my art symbols movie clips. A couple of reasons for that. One quick reason is that if you end up doing a lot of action script work, if something is a movie clip symbol in your library, you can actually create instances of that symbol on the fly using code. So you could set something up so that like your user clicks and it'll put a symbol instance right there. So it's convenient to have them named that way so that in case you later go on to ActionScript or you work in an environment where you need to have things named, that will be a thing you can have. Okay, so we're going to call this circle. Now, I don't always do this, but it's a good idea to begin it with a capital letter. That's for your programmers. Another thing that's a good idea is to not use any spaces in your names. Flash lets you, but if it's going to go into something that's an ActionScript environment, no spaces. So I'm going to call this circle stroke. And if I call it circle stroke or circle fill, that means it's a stroked circle or filled circle. Or if I call it stroke fill, that means a filled and stroked circle. I will then put in here its diameter, which is 100 pixels, and it's the width of the stroke, which is 8 pixels, I hope. Yes, that's what I remembered right. Okay. We'll make it a movie clip. Oh, and then finally, underscore art. Anytime I see an underscore art symbol, what that means is that I'm not going to change it. I'm going to leave it as it is. Or if I am going to change it, what I will do is actually duplicate it and then change that. Okay, so click OK. And here's my circle. Thing to remember about this is anytime that you use a stroke, the bounding box and really the size of the symbol is not actually the size of the stroked circle. It's the size of the line within. Okay, so just think about that stroke as decoration. So as far as Flash is concerned, that's the size of the circle. But then you've got a bigger stroke on it. Okay, that gets kind of confusing sometimes. I still confuse myself with that, especially when I'm trying to line things up with the side of the stage and find it hanging off or something like that. Okay, we don't really need this on stage right now because we're going to make a composite symbol again. We're going to make a bicycle wheel. Okay, so I'm going to do that by choosing new symbol, and we will say bike wheel. Oops. And it can be a movie clip now, because we're remembering that the library type is really just the default behavior. You can always change it to a graphic symbol on the timeline. You can always change a graphic symbol to a movie clip timeline on the or movie clip symbol in the timeline. The one thing that you can't do, which we are going to see becomes important, is you can't add ActionScript to a graphic symbol. So that's why I usually make my symbols in the library movie clips. There is something has been said, at least in the past. I'm not sure about the current version of Flash, but in past versions, movie clip symbols have been less weighty. They've required less processor power and less storage than graphics. I'm not sure if that's still true or not. Okay, so let's take a quick look at our library. There we see bike wheel, circle stroke. What we're going to do is bring an instance of circle stroke into bike wheel. However, before I do that, I want to show you a mistake. Okay, this is bike wheel. What if I were to come to my library and put bike wheel inside bike wheel? That's when we rip a hole in the matrix. That can't happen. Only MC Escher can do that. Because what will happen to us is we are going to get a message that says you can't place a symbol inside of itself, and that makes perfect sense. So remember, you look up here. This tells you what this timeline is. This tells you what symbol you're editing. The edit bar tells you where you are. So you want to make sure that anything you drag over here isn't that symbol, or else Flash will say no. Okay, let's go ahead and align this. And let's see, we will make this the circle. I'm going to try to start naming my layers as much as possible, though later on we're going to have so many layers that I'm not going to name them. Let's go ahead and make another layer here for our spokes. And this will be a reminder here. Let's go ahead and make a line for our one spoke. That's too wide for a stroke. Or a spoke, not a stroke. Too small. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to make this the same width as my circle. So let's change that width to 150. Oh no, 100 was my circle. Alrighty. Before I do anything, I want to go ahead and change this into a symbol as well, because I'm going to put several of these on. And if I were to decide later that this spoke is too big or too small or needs to be bent or something like that, I'd have to go through all kinds of like merge shapes or something to change them all. So if I instead convert this to a symbol, this can also be a movie clip. I'm going to call it spoke. Actually, let's call it bike spoke _art. Movie clip registration, yes. Okay, so we want these to go around. I'm going to do this off of my wheel layer just so that we can see what's going on, and because sometimes it's easier to do that. So we will come into our transform panel, and we'll close that so we can, let's move this over here so it's not blocking it. We'll take this thing, and I'm going to decide just, let's decide that our spokes will be at 30-degree intervals. Okay, that way it won't be too crowded. So we're going to rotate this thing 30 degrees. And I wanted to remind you here, of course, by default it came out when I created the instance or dragged it out of the library, came out with this transformation point in the center, which means that it rotated around the center, which is exactly what we want now in this case. Remember this symbol instance. And I wanted to remind you about this button here, which duplicates whatever is selected, and it duplicates how it's been transformed. So what this will do is it's going to make a copy of that symbol instance and transform it by 30 degrees from where it's now. So that makes my next spoke, my next spoke, my next spoke, next spoke, next spoke. Okay, so very quickly I've made a bunch of spokes. Just to make life easier, why don't we group these? So now it's not a symbol, it's a group. You can see that over here. And we can bring this down. Remember, if I try to align these two with them just kind of sitting like that, if I hit align them to each other, it's going to put them to a common spot. Not what I want. What I want to do is align this one, the spokes, to the wheel. So I bring that over so that it's inside somewhat. Then select them both. And then it will leave the wheel in the same place. Did it? Something moved. Flash, how can you do that to me? This is something new, and maybe it's because it was off the side a bit or something like that. Well, anyhow, now we will select them both and align them to the stage, like so. So there is my wheel. Typically, I'm not going to put this on the main timeline and rotate it. Instead, what we're going to do is create another symbol, and we're going to call that bike wheel underscore spin. Okay? We probably should have called this bike wheel underscore art. In fact, we are going to call it bike wheel underscore art, and we can do that just by coming into the library, double-clicking on the name, and call it underscore art. And basically that means it's just shapes. It's just a picture. Okay, two ways to make bike wheel spin. One is to come in here and say insert new symbol and then create a symbol called bike wheel spin. Or if you're lazy, you can come here and convert this into bike wheel spin. In this case, that's not such a good idea, because then what you would do would actually make an instance of bike wheel spin inside of bike wheel art, and your names would be all messed up and you'd be very confused. So now, at this point in your careers, don't be lazy just yet. Okay, so instead, we're going to come in and insert a new symbol that's going to put us into the symbol editor mode, and we're going to call this bike wheel underscore spin. Now, when this is an animated type of symbol, when it's got animation on its timeline, I kind of like to give it a name that's going to help me remember what it's doing. And notice I am naming all my bike parts, bike wheel, bike spoke, and all that, so that later on maybe I'll put them together in a folder called bike parts or something like that. Movie clip is good. And now here's bike wheel spin. What we will do is take an instance of bike wheel art, put it in there. We will go ahead and align it to the stage, like so. And we're just going to put a motion tween in here. And I want to make this, actually we're going to put a classic tween, I should say. We're going to mostly use classic tweens as long as you're using CC, because they are a little more flexible, and especially if you're outputting to JavaScript using the Easel.js or the JavaScript output options for Flash, they do create a smaller file, less complicated file. The newer tweens, the motion tweens, actually can end up with a lot of code. So classic tweens are actually better now, just like Coke Classic is better. So to make a classic tween, we start with our beginning keyframe. We make a new keyframe at the end, so I'm going to insert a keyframe. We, in this case, are not going to change anything, because what we're going to do is put on our classic tween. I can click anywhere between these two keyframes, create classic tween. We're going to tell it to rotate clockwise, and it will automatically say one time, which is good. Now, we did see that there's sometimes a little bit of a glitch because the last frame is just the same as the first frame. I'm going to show you an easy, quick way to get around that, because really what we want to have happen is we want this position to be the last frame, not that one. Okay, so when it loops around, it goes from that to that. Quick and easy way to do this is to simply go to that frame that's right before it. Let's make these a little bigger. Too big. It's always hard getting used to working on this small. You know what? Good time to use that thing we learned about last time, which is center the playhead in here. Okay, aren't we glad we learned that last time? Okay, so what we're going to do here is come right into the frame right before, in the middle of this tween, and this is perfectly legal and okay to do. And we're going to insert a keyframe here. Okay, so, oops. Let me come down here. So what we have done here is now we have two keyframes. You'll notice this is the previous last keyframe, and look at that, it's gray, where this new keyframe is blue. And that's because when I created this new keyframe, it copied over the fact that there was a tween here as well. And so if I were to actually move this keyframe out, hey, look at that, there's a new tween. That's not good. So the second part of this step is you make the new keyframe before, then you come into that one and remove the tween from it. And then I do still want this to be 24 frames long, so I'm just going to move this over. Nobody will know the difference. It's just one frame. We notice visually, we notice the little pause much more than we notice the kind of difference in the number of degrees it's moved. And by the way, I just did remove those extra frames that I had there. Okay, so we have bike wheel spin. It's a movie clip. So we can come down to scene 1. That's our main timeline, and I'm going to put out 2 instances of bike wheel spin. We will test our movie like so, and you'll see, oh, did I make them go the wrong way? Oh, what in the world? You know what? Something got messed up when I made that. Let's go into here and look at our timeline, and I bet you, yeah, you know what? Flash did some thinking for me, and I hate it when Flash does some thinking for me. What it did is I changed this position. So what I need to actually do is make it clockwise 0 times, because I forgot. It's not actually rotating a full rotation. It's only rotating almost a full rotation. Let's do ourselves a favor here. I'm going to go in here and choose one of my spokes. Remember, my spokes are a group, so I'm going to break those apart with Command B or Control B. We're going to choose this horizontal spoke, and we're going to give it a color effect. I'm going to give it a tint, and let's tint it pink. Okay, so that way we can really see what's going on. We can always go back and untint it later. So you can see there it's making almost one complete rotation, and then when it loops around to the first frame, it makes the complete rotation. Okay. Good thing that came up, because I would have forgotten to mention that. Moving way too fast. That's easy, though. We've got bike wheel spin. All we need to do is lengthen this. If we were really fussy, we would worry about that difference between the last one, but we're not going to be too worried about that. Let's lengthen it to 2 seconds. Let's see how that looks. Okay, there's our bike wheel spinning. Now, back to our main timeline. Just to remember what we can do here, we can take this one and change it from a movie clip to a graphic symbol. This is now an instance behavior. It's not bike wheel spin in the library. It's just this particular instance, and we can tell it to sit on a single frame, frame 1, and now we've got some kind of crazy bike. Okay, difference between graphic symbols and movie clip symbols. In the next video, what we're going to do is actually make a full bicycle, and see how we can use these nested timelines in order to make our bicycle hit a post or a tree or something like that. And then we'll look at how we can make a bicycle logo. Okay, so come on back for part 2.